Thank you, Karen. And first of all, I would like to thank their organizers of this outstanding event. And it's really nice to give this presentation on my own land. And what I'd like to mention also, in my career, I spent 5 years doing research in University of Alberta in biological sciences, which is for me also I can would say alma mater. And I know that it's end of the day, everybody is tired. What I would like to talk about today is what is actually aquaponics, and I call my presentation Evolution Aquaponics, and it's not just evolution of technology, but also evolution of the concept of aquaponics. Better understanding what aquaponics is, because there is quite a confusion what it is, and some people say that it's just a combination of aquaculture and hydroponics. Some say, well, it's just hydroponics with fish producing nutrients, and some say it's just that fish facility producing facility, and plants are just used as a biofilters, one of the filters. So what is aquaponics is, and we're going to talk about that. Now I'm coming from Alberta Agriculture, and of course their mandate of Alberta Agriculture is to stimulate industry growth through development and commercialization innovative technologies. So that's why we talk about competitiveness of our industry, but now in our ministry we also talk about social licensing. What it means much better interaction with local communities, and I'm glad that Hani made this presentation. There are lots of overlaps between what we're trying to achieve and what City of Edmonton is trying to achieve in food security. So the whole objective of more than, actually it's 13 years since I started doing aquaponics research, is can we make environmentally friendly technologies based on integrated farming more competitive? Because if we cannot make it more competitive, it means it's just a buzzword. So in order to answer this question, we need to realize that there are quite a bit of technologies out there, and pretty advanced technologies, and can we use their concept of integration and nutrient recycling and water recycling, and on the other side make aquaponics operations economically viable. This is a key question. If we don't achieve that, aquaponics will be always on the sidelines. So, and the answer is a new generation of aquaponics which assimilates all technical advances already existing in the industry, and basically we're focused on 3 areas. It's fish production, solids production, like greenhouse production, and most importantly, waste management. So again, coming back, what aquaponics is. The confusion is that it's just that take the fish tank and start pumping the water from fish tank to hydroponically grown plants, and that's enough, and it will work. And I'm a reviewer of many scientific journals, and again and again when I read manuscript, I understand that people realize that people make the same mistake. they think it's just their, that fish tank connected to the plants. In fact, aquaponics is what we call an example of multi-trophic agro-ecosystem. What it means? It means that we not just design the system which produces fish and plants, we reproduce those what we call trophic interactions between different components of the system to make it sustainable, self-sustainable, and productive. Basically, we are designing an ecosystem. And every startup aquaponics operation, as soon as you put fish and plants, and if you don't kill microorganisms using antibiotics, ozonators, or UV sterilizers, it will invariably populated by huge number of different microorganisms, which not just include bacteria, but also protozoa, archaea, algae, you name it. So we, in science, and I have a scientific background, although I worked a lot with engineers to design our systems. In science, we design 5 distinct microbiotas, which can be identified in aquaponics. And by the way, I'm very actively collaborating with several research groups in the University of Alberta studying microbial profile of aquaponic systems. So what are those microbiotas? That's obviously a population in the water column. It's a fish gut microbiota, the root rhizosphere communities, biofilm, and like Karen mentioned, their population in aerobic bioreactor, where we mineralize solid wastes to produce plant nutrients. By the way, I may use too many scientific terms from plant physiology and biochemistry, and if you need any clarification, what I understood that many people have different background, so don't hesitate to interrupt me and ask what it means. So this colonization process can last from a few months to years, and eventually yields and establish mature aquaponics. At this point, aquaponics basically becomes self-regulating ecosystem. So basically what happens that trophic interactions, which basically it's a food chain, and it's trophic levels, it's different levels of their food chain. Those stable interactions are created that serve to link all living components of the system. A mature aquaponics ecosystem is characterized by stabilized parameters of the system, like water parameters, but also improved yield of plants and fish. So this is a question I got from during many conferences when some people were very skeptical if aquaponics can produce better results than, let's say, hydroponics. Because in hydroponics, you tune up their concentration of each nutrient in such a way that the plant gets the best of the best, and it doesn't have any deficiencies in nutrients. And aquaponics, on the other hand, we don't control it. We just let the system develop itself and produce. So how come that this system can produce more than hydroponics? And I'll try to answer this question. So agri-ecosystems as a whole, and aquaponics is just one example of such systems, they are superior to existing traditional ways to produce food because they are recycling nutrients and water much more efficiently. And another feature that those systems have much less environmental impact. As a matter of fact, their generation 4 system we developed in Brooks and tested in commercial greenhouse in 2011-2013 is the only system in the world which was capable to produce food without any waste. Everything was utilized inside the system. So this is the answer to your question, that when you look at a picture like that and people think something is wrong with that. If you can look at hydroponically grown plants and aquaponically grown plants, and the first question I get, was something wrong with your hydroponic formulation? That's why the roots are much less there. In fact, those roots are basically pretty normal for a hydroponically grown plant. The question is about those roots. Why these roots plants grown in aquaponics so much bigger? And the answer is that on this planet, green plants, they evolved in very close association with microorganisms during millions of years. And both groups of organisms, they have benefit of such association. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. So there is a very specialized group of microorganisms which actually promote plant growth, and it's for their selfish reason, right? The more roots plants have, the more food it gives to their microorganisms which inhabit those roots. And by the way, one fact, the density of microbial population in rhizosphere in average about 3 orders of magnitude higher than in the rest of the soil. So it tells you something, right? And the question is, can we harness this power, power of association between microorganisms and plants in order to grow food? So it's just a few other examples. This is sugarcane root growth in hydroponics and aquaponics. And this is an example how fast, I don't know, how many people have agricultural background? If you can raise the hand. Okay. But believe me that the basil, you're familiar with basil and pesto, and usually it takes probably 4 or 5 weeks to grow basil of this size, and it's almost marketable. And if you look at the difference between these plants and these plants, there is only 1 week difference. So this is another very good example. Why it's good? Because I wasn't involved in this production. That's a commercial trial done by Red Hat Corp, which happened to be the largest greenhouse producer in prairies. And the grower, he's a professional greenhouse grower, grew their basil plants in hydroponics. That was another house with hydroponics and aquaponics. And that's the picture he produced. Now, the plants on there, because it's not scientific experiment, so that these plants are of different age. The plants on the right, hydroponically grown plants, they're 6-week-old, and on the left, 4-week-old aquaponics plants. So it tells you something. What's wrong with this picture? So, and this is I found just for the scale. So how we can make aquaponics facilities to produce more food and to become faster, mature faster. Because with all those advantages, if you have to wait 1 year before your system becomes mature, you are losing money, right? You invested to build this greenhouse, to run this operation, and you need some return back. So what we offer with existing aquaponics systems already, we can provide inoculum, we can provide beneficial microbial culture to speed up this process of maturation. That's clear enough so far? So that basically their interruption, their only possible interruption could be, like I said, that chemicals, antibiotics, and we found in one case we started using new feed formulation, and the system started losing productivity, and then we found that this fish feed contained more poultry byproduct meal, which had more antibiotics. So basically we killed some of their microorganisms and selected the other ones which are more resistant to this particular antibiotics. So you have to be careful with that. So again, coming back, what their new generation aquaponics is, what the features of more efficient and economically viable aquaponics system we have been developing in Alberta for the last 15 years. It's more efficient filtration methods, addition of the second loop to convert solid waste into plant nutrients, intensification of the mineralization process using more efficient methods to supply oxygen, creating more favorable conditions for microbial culture, and automation and computerization. So basically the major goal of new generation aquaponics is commercial and environmental sustainability. Again, having said that, we don't imply that there is no any other way to produce your food in aquaponically, I would say, in your backyard. If you are working with a smaller scale operation, it's obviously you don't have to throw $1,000 worth money for $1,000 worth, would say, computer control systems, right? So it will still work. And we have examples for much smaller backyard system right now at Crop Desiccation Center North. So in our research project in Brooks, which lasted from 2001 to 2011, we used 2 different tilapia varieties and about 60 different crops, and I will scroll it pretty fast because I have about 130 slides, right? So I have to be fast, and yeah, we used basically their plant choice is unlimited. You can grow everything. It depends on their temperature requirements of your plants. If, for example, you are growing cold water fish like trout, so that you probably, it's a not very good idea to use tomato, to grow tomato plants or eggplants or peppers. So, but you still can grow lettuce and most of the green vegetables. So what are plant types, groups? It's green vegetables, edible flowers, medicinal plants, herbs, vine crops like we grew tomatoes and peppers and cucumbers and eggplants, aquatic plants. This is just a few examples of the crop produced in aquaponics. You see that those are long English cucumbers and tomato plants. This is, by the way, from our Generation 1 system. Bitter melons and herbs. And in order to make your operation viable, the choice of plants is very, very important. And first of all, you have to do a good marketing job. And it's, as I'm aware that lots of people here with business background, right? So a robust, a solid business plan is absolutely crucial before you start building your company. So we grew different crops, and some of them produce higher yields, just genetics. Some of them are low yields. What you really need to estimate, not just your yield, how many kilograms you can produce per square meter, but how much gross revenue you will have for per square meter. That will determine your economic stability. Aquatic plants are very interesting because aquatic plants adapted to withdraw and to survive on much, much lower concentration of nutrients than traditional crops. But on the other side, the aquatic plants can be a very good, very profitable crop during a certain period of time. And we, so far, we found that most of the aquatic crops really grew very fast in the system. And those are medicinals. We grew a variety of them. And here is a parameter of the what we call fourth generation pilot scale system developed in southern Alberta in Alberta Agriculture and Rural Development Research Center. So that we had a total volume 73 cubic meters, their plant area 84 square meters. It's okay that I'm using metrics here, right? Everybody understands metrics. So the flow rate 700 liters per minute. Fish production capacity is 3.7 tons of year, and the basal crop production 3.5 tons per year. But if you are growing butterhead lettuce, that number will be 10 tons per year. So that basically this small system can produce from, let's say, 7 to 15 tons of produce per year. And this is just an example of our system. You see that the plants are different, different age, and they're harvested, they're planted on their right hand side and harvested on the left hand side. So you have so-called staggered production, and the same with fish. What's very, very important about this system, that you need to keep balance between animal component and plant component. Because if you, for example, have too many animals, too many fish there, you produce so much nutrients that the system will be overwhelmed. The plants will not cope with this increasing amount of nutrients, nutrient out input, and vice versa. If you don't have enough fish, then the plants will deplete those nutrients and they will start decreasing yield. So that's why they're in aquaponics as very different from, let's say, hydroponics or fish culture. You need to balance these two components to produce best results. So this is the question I'm always getting from commercial growers because they would say, hydroponic people say, well, it's too much power. We did an estimate how much power is required in the system and what equipment is more power thirsty. So, and this is of course main sump pump. It's about 1 kilowatt per hour, which is working 24/7. And this is a pump which take the water from the collecting tank and pump it to the fish tanks. And then their water gradually cascades through their water filtration equipment to plant beds and then back to the collecting tank. And lights is very essential for producing high-value crop and green vegetables, for example. For most of their greenhouse operations, they don't use lights right now, but even hydroponic operations, they started using lights, I would say, Pick and Pack in Dove's greenhouses in Lacombe and Red Hat Co-op. So lights are important and they are power thirsty. And oxygen concentrators, in this case we used Onyx ASAP, American produced, but right now we have a different generator in other 25%. And total is about 3.8 kilowatt per hour. It's not bad. It's actually pretty energy efficient. So we developed 4 different generations, and this is our generation 1. The generation 1 facility is based on model developed by University of Virgin Islands. If you Google UVI aquaponics or Dr. James Rakosi, you'll see lots of references. Dr. James Rakosi is regarded as a pioneer of modern aquaponics, and he came to Brooks, to Canada, to help us build the first system. And the way it works, you have 4 tanks, and why 4? I explained already, because of their staggered production of fish, so that the total growth period for fish is 24 weeks, so that we basically replace fish every 6 weeks, so that their total biomass is pretty much more or less constant in the system. And water is pumped through their clarifiers, which are basically sedimentation tanks, then filter tanks filled with orchard netting to sediment smaller particles, and then 2 plant traps. Those are plant traps, and I showed in one of the pictures, if you remember, with tomatoes. So what's happening after separation of solids in generation 1 system? And what I would like to stress, it's very, very important to handle solid waste in the system. If you don't do it properly, it's a reason for failure in 99% of cases. So that solid waste management is crucial, because if you don't do it properly, it accumulates in the system and it creates conditions for other kind of microorganisms, anaerobic microorganisms, which produce toxic compounds. That's where a system fails. And if you know, in some fish tanks, aquariums, they produce this not very nice smell. It means that there is sludge, decaying sludge, which is producing gases like H2S, ammonium, which are toxic. So when Dr. James Rakosi developed his generation 1 system, he wanted to make sure that he removes solids as efficiently as possible. And the water, of course, goes to the plants. Very nice and very robust system. It's relatively low tech, but nothing to break really. It's sedimentation tanks. They do their job pretty well. So, and we worked with this system for a number of years, about 5 years, and we got very nice results. What was wrong with the system? And I'll just repeat it. You see that those troughs, what about space between them? You don't grow anything, right? And mind you that the system was developed in Virgin Islands. So it was outdoor system, it wasn't a greenhouse. So that they didn't have to heat this space. On the other side, greenhouse space is very expensive to maintain, to operate and maintain in our climate. So the first thing what we did, we eliminated those troughs, and we did one bed. And we increased production per square meter almost 2 times right there. Just doing this very, very simple modification. So, and that was my team, construction team. So we build, it's really very, very affordable, very easy to build plant bed, and it can be used also in the demo aquaponics facility. We can help you with the design. So we used, because of their plant bed, we wanted to make sure that the nutrients and oxygen were distributed uniformly. So we injected their fish water through those pipes, perforated pipes, and we collected water using the same pipes. So we never had any issues with any oxygen deficiencies in the corners of their plant bed. So, and this is our Geotube Sump. What Geotube Sump is it's basically a filter. We flocculated the suspended solids in this system, generation system, and we pump this water with flocks through their geotube tank, that which is basically was a big fiberglass tank lined with geotube fabric with their 400 micron pore size, and the water was gradually percolated and returned back to the system. And initially we thought that we can remove solids and just use them for composting outside when they accumulate too much. And then we, when we started using the system, 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, and 1 year, 2 years, and no accumulation of the solids. What the hell is going on? But the truth is that because we maintain the solids always wet and oxygenated, so that the bacteria were still working, they still were mineralizing the solids in the geotube tank. And for example, even if you have, let's say, 10% rate of mineralization per day, after 10 days, your output will be equal to your input, right? What happens with the solids? They increase to a certain volume, and then they stop decreasing because the bacteria will degrade them as fast as you put new solids. And that's what something very interesting we learned from the system, and we thought, wait a minute, it's a zero waste system, right? So we also used limestone separately and in their geotube tank, and also zeolite to capture their ammonium produced by bacteria when they mineralized organic solid waste, fish waste. So this is a two-loop system which had fish, plants, and waste management, waste treatment facility. And why we call it two loops? Because one loop is responsible for liquid waste treatment with the plants, and another for solid waste. So, and this is just some of the examples of our system we built. This is what we call generation 3 with Geotube Sump. And some of their components were removed afterwards, and like swirl separators and clarifiers in their fourth generation. And this is a cleaning system, by the way, so we still had some buildup of sludge in the plant bed, and we built a system which allowed to actively remove the sludge. It's basically pipes which laid on the bottom, and they stir the sludge, and sludge was removed with the flow. Very simple, very affordable system. So this is our Geotube tank, and it had a false bottom, and we had also bags with two grades of zeolite, coarse and fine grade, and limestone. So the purpose of this filter is actually three purposes. It's biofiltration, because the surface of this material was still covered by biofilm, chemical removal. So their zeolite was capable to absorb ammonium, toxic ammonium, and also mechanical too. We were separating their solids from their liquid. And this is their system for mixing flocculant with their fish water. This is their solids removal. We use swirl separators, which is basically tanks where you create a vortex. So your solids, they are harvested from the bottom. They're collected in the middle and harvested from the bottom. But we don't use it anymore. Those are swirl separators. And this is, we use the steam heat exchanger, and also we used their hot water heat exchanger too. So this is fourth generation. What's different from their third generation? You will see this is their something very new. And first of all, we had the drum filter. Is far more efficient system to separate solids from water. It's basically a drum which rotates with their perforated membrane, so that their solids are collected on the inner part of drum, and then when you know that you have too much solids, it initiates their bud flushing, and you remove the solids from the drum filter, which are deposited in what we call aerobic bioreactor or aerobic biodigester, which is oxygenated by concentrated oxygen. And this is a special device. We call it oxygenator. In this particular case, it's so-called blow head oxygenator. I don't want to go to technical details, but you can boost the oxygen level, dissolved oxygen level, 5-6 times. So when you have so much oxygen, your process increases many times. So that what it means, you will need 10 times smaller tank compared to, let's say, aeration. And when the process stops, is every 2-3 weeks, their decant is collected and flocculated, and again using Geotube tank returned to the system. So that's why we call it two-loop system. there is a solid waste loop, and there is their liquid waste loop. So and it goes back to the fish. So we used 300 micron membrane. That's how the membrane looks like. This is their drum, and of the drum filter. And we try to use 50 to 90 micron, and it plug up very fast, so that their solids were deposited in the bioreactor. That's how bioreactor looks like. And this is their oxygenator. So the oxygen is injected through the tubing. You don't see it here, but I'll show you later. And the water is, their top is flooded, and water is falling down through their oxygenator and gets saturated with oxygen. And that's when it's full, and you can see that flooding of their oxygenator. And when it's full, we stop it. We let their residual solids to sediment, and then we take decant and we return it back to the system. So no any waste of water in this case. In generation 1 system, you remember we had these filter tanks with the orchard netting I mentioned. So in order to clean those filtration tanks, you had to take all this netting, you had to pressure wash it, and all this water is lost. And it's depart from, that you have to be prepared doing very dirty job. So in this system, it's all automatic, and it's minimum labor required, and no waste of water. This is the flocculation, natural flocculation of the system. And I will scroll this and just their analysis of their different fractions of water. I don't want to bore you with all this technical stuff. So this is something very important. Total suspended solids. As soon as you start growing fish, the fish will produce a manure, larger particles and small particles. Basically, suspended solids, it's a part of their solids which stays suspended in the system, in the water. And managing those suspended solids is absolutely crucial in order to make your aquaponics system good, free of failure. So I know that many people are using gravel beds, and I don't argue against gravel beds. As a matter of fact, if you, for example, have input of your solids balanced with the mineralization rate in your gravel, then you're okay. So that their bacteria will degrade their solid organic solid waste, and won't allow these solids accumulate in your gravel bed. Like you remember, I gave you an example with Geotube. But if you have too much suspended solids, then finally they will plug up your gravel. And what happens next? It will create conditions for development of anaerobic microflora, and it will kill the plants and fish. So in order to avoid that, periodically you have to stop all your operation, and you have to hand wash all your gravel. Just imagine this job, right? On the top of that, of course, you have to remove also roots, because roots will start, they will harm solids to plug up the gravel beds. So if you look at certain design of your aquaponics system, that's something you have to keep in mind, that managing solids in this system is absolutely crucial. So, and it's their suspended solids, they will establish on certain level, and this level will depend on fish load, solids capture efficiency and rate of their solids breakdown. And what their rate of solids breakdown will depend on, its temperature, its level of dissolved oxygen, and presence of active microbial culture. Those are three most important parameters if you want to build your own aquaponics. You have to keep it in mind. So, and I was mentioning that it's important to prevent accumulation of solids in their root zone, right? Because if you have it, you plug up the roots, and roots have, by the way, a natural ability to accumulate solids through the process called rhizofiltration, which is used in municipal water treatment, by the way. So what solids accumulation in the plant results to? Anaerobic decay of organic material with production of toxic compounds like ammonium and H2S. What's very important, opportunistic pathogenic fungi like Pythium just love this stuff. They will start propagating on this organic material, and then they will infect the plant roots, which are already stressed out by your toxic compounds. That's how their failure of their system starts happening. And it's, of course, plant stress and yield loss due to diseases. This is one of the examples. I don't know if it's clear. This is how nasty and muddy their plant tank can look. This, you see, you don't see the bottom. It's all covered by this heavy organic decaying sludge. So you need to prevent it. And that's how plant roots look like if you have a problem like this. So that's what you have to avoid, right? So, and I mentioned that it's a major reason for their system failure. And this is just a schedule for solenoid valves when they turn in and off to remove the sludge from the plant bed. It's all programmable, and you can buy a controller for $200, $250. So automatic control, I won't dwell on this too long time. We used Argus control system because we were developing commercial prototype. Basically the cost of this equipment was probably higher than the cost of the whole system. But it was a pilot scale operation, and basically this pilot scale operation was supposed to have all components of much larger system, like 100-acre system. That's why we used Argus control system. For your demo, or let's say, or for your home operation, you don't need to purchase it. And this is my stuff. This is inputs and outputs in the system. And it's all, if you are interested how it works, we always can, give you this presentation. Oxygenation. Yeah, oxygen is a single most crucial factor in aquaponics operation. How you improve the oxygen level? You can aerate it, and you can use concentrated oxygen. And we started from generation 1 and 2 and 3 was using aeration, and it's nothing wrong with aeration, absolutely not. But with oxygenation, you speed up so much their rate of the solids breakdown, and you improve so much the risk management in your system that it is a must for a larger commercial operations. So that's what you have to keep in mind. On the other side, we have now 9 mini systems, and each contains about 700 liters. And each of them has this small oxygenator, which works just perfect. And even having small system, and hospital oxygen concentrator, now concentrators get more and more affordable, that you may consider using oxygen, concentrated oxygen, instead of air, even for much smaller systems. So that was designed, by the way, by me and my team. And this concentrator, you won't find it in the market. So this is, we call it LHO, but it's actually it's oxygen tower. This is their small hospital unit. I don't know if anybody saw this. In each hospital you can find them. So that just imagine that this commercial pilot scale operation needed only 2 hospital size oxygen concentrators. So these 2 machines produce enough oxygen to produce to grow 15 tons of food per year, and feed probably how many, 100 people. So that's how efficient oxygenation is compared to aeration. And this is just some details of their, this is the top of their, this is their saturation, hypersaturation 352%, or 28.4 ppm instead of regular 4.5. So flow control, we designed a system which allowed to also control flow. If you look at this diagram, you see that, and it's, by the way, it's oxygen level, right? And this is, by the way, feeding of fish when feeding started. You see how dramatically oxygen level drops down during the feeding. This is the most critical time for fish. So, and we thought that when you have, and you have different age fish, right? And it's obvious that this is the youngest fish, and then there's the second youngest, and the older, and this is the largest fish, 2-pound fish. And we had about 700 or about 1.5 ton of fish in each tank, which was about 5 cubic meters. So 1.5 ton, imagine that. And when this fish starts feeding, it requires lots of oxygen. So when we saw this diagram, we decided why not to provide more water to this tank and less water to these tanks. So in this case, you will use oxygen much more efficiently, right? Because here it's the fish will have some excess of oxygen, but where we need it, it's here. So we designed a system which allowed to control the flow rate depending on oxygen level. It's called variable solenoid valve, and this is the flow meters. And we could see, and all information, of course, from the flow meters through this data acquisition cable went to the computer, so that everything was automated and computerized. And this is variable solenoid valve, which dependent on oxygen level. So we actually managed to improve dramatically the performance of the system and technology using oxygenation. So the advantages are, because you have higher oxygen level, you can put more fish, right? So you can grow more fish in your system. But also very important risk management, because when you have excess of oxygen, if something happens, and I just imagine the modern facility, they have 120 kilograms of fish per cubic meter, so that the fish will go to their surface in 15 minutes if you are using aeration. But if you have excess of oxygen, it will give you much more space to react to a problem, to the problem. That's why it dramatically improved risk management, which of course very important for commercial systems. High positive redox potential, of course, high mineralization rate. We talked about that. No water splashing from bubbling, which is very essential for food safety. And you will, as soon as you start growing, would say, your produce for food, the food safety becomes number one. Number one. It's very, very important. So less power consumed and less water evaporation rate. We managed to improve it 10-20 times. Better risk management we talked about. And pH stability, if you remember, we talked what mature system is. And I mentioned that one of the characteristics of mature system, stability of water parameters. And that's how stable pH and electric conductivity, which is also a very important parameter. Again, it takes some time to reach this point. If you are running hydroponic operation or aquaculture, pH control is one of the most essential parts of your protocol, production protocol. But funny thing is, in hydroponics, you have to add acid all the time, because when plants take nutrients, they drive pH up. When you grow fish, you have to add base to your fish water, because nitrifying bacteria break down ammonium, they release acid. And you see my point, what my point is? When you combine these two things, all of a sudden you don't have to control anything. The pH becomes stable. That's the advantage. That's a huge advantage of an integrated system. The synergy that these processes, they match each other. The system becomes incredibly stable. So you actually don't have to do anything. We didn't adjust pH for many, many months, even years. So, and this is just before it was during the day, diurnal, and this is week. So, and yeah, this is correlation. Again, I'm becoming too technical, and maybe I'll just scroll these slides. The idea is that in aquaculture they try to maintain high pH. Why they are doing that? Because nitrifying bacteria, which are most important component of aquaculture system, and we talked before this presentation that actually aquaculture industry is on a way to build ecosystem. They utilize very actively beneficial microorganisms. What I mean is recirculated aquaculture systems. And they try to create conditions for those bacteria, beneficial bacteria, which convert toxic ammonium into less toxic nitrate. So because it's known that nitrifying bacteria prefer alkaline medium, they always add base. And what we showed, that in our case, there is no any correlation between level of toxic ammonium and pH. That basically there are some other microorganisms which can play the same role. What we do in, I would say, commercial aquaculture system, we just select two particular ones and use them. But in a system like aquaponics, in ecosystem, you don't have to worry about that. Because even if your pH drops down, the system will be still functioning. And that's very, very important. That's where the difference is between conventional technology based on monoculture and agro-ecosystem. That's why we call aquaponics agro-ecosystem. So I will scroll this pretty fast, and this is, by the way, the work we're doing in collaboration with microbiologists from University of Alberta. So that, what are the features of new generation system? It's stable pH, we showed that, zero waste, zero water discharge, 100, the only system which has 100% nutrient use efficiency, no fertilizer supplements, minimum labor, highest water use efficiency. And this is just some short examples of commercialization. Red Hat Corp, by the way, is the largest greenhouse company in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So this is commercial trial in Red Hat Corp in Redcliffe. This is just, I'll scroll it pretty fast. We modified, actually we improved the system compared to generation form in Brooks. We had 2 aerobic bioreactors instead of 1, and the same drum filter. So this is the crop we produced, and those are fish tanks. And that's how they made plant beds. It's very, very cheap. You see that it's just plastic, but it's risky. If somebody decides to punch a hole, that all your water will be gone. So, and this is another thing. It's aquaponic cucumbers. What I showed you before was rafting culture, and this is substrate culture. And there is a very, very interesting aspect with biochar. I don't know if have you heard about biochar? So that we developed biochar as both a growing medium and also filtration medium for production of crops. And this is commercially grown aquaponic cucumbers in this greenhouse. And you saw this picture, right? So it was a quite successful trial. And MDM Aquafarms, that's in central Alberta. Also, this is in Northern Bioponics in British Columbia. It's all based on our technology. This is drum filter and this is bioreactor. So we continue working with other organic feedstocks, and this is their research we're doing with poultry manure, and we're developing a hybrid system which can consume different organic feedstocks. This is bioreactor, and you can see their agitator. So this is their reaction mixture. It's 1,000 liters. This is their what we call probiotic reservoir. This is basically a tank with their feeding solution, which contains diluted decant after bioreactor. And this is their tomatoes. It's about 2 weeks after the transplanting. And this is after 8 weeks, so that you can see the difference, right? So there, we wanted in cucumbers, the main purpose was to really demonstrate that the same concept, the same approach can be used for any other animal waste and any other livestock industry. So that the future development is economically viable large-scale commercial operation, which are competitive to operations based on monoculture. And a good example is urban ecological systems in Australia, in Sydney. And they visited us a couple of months ago. Generation 5 system utilizing continuous mode bioreactor, which allows us to use continuously to carry on their fermentation process. Saline water aquaponics or brackish water aquaponics, you know that the fresh water reserves in the wall in the world is very, very limited. So that we made some experiments which allowed us to assume that we can use the system also for brackish water or saline water based agriculture, which is a huge problem in developing countries in Asia, Middle East, but also in some areas of Alberta too. New fish species, high value, like Australian sea bass. We're working with one of their companies, big companies in southern Alberta. And we talked about plant factories and urban agriculture. Harry was talking about community gardens and green roofs. Basically, the future of agriculture can be very, very different from what we see now. The food can be in 22nd century grown in skyscrapers. I don't know if you are familiar with vertical farming. What sounds like as utopia tomorrow can be, or fantasy tomorrow can be reality. And as a matter of fact, one of their Edmonton companies, they have a farm located in Sherwood Park. They developed a system like that. They have multi-level growing production area, and they're using LED. So again, it's happening just in front of your eyes. And Hani showed you one of their vertical farming in BC, in Vancouver. So that the food production can be very, very, very different from what we see right now. And aquaponics, as an example of zero waste system where nutrients and water are used much more efficiently than in conventional agriculture, will be part of that. And in this shape or another. So that, I guess, it concludes my presentation. Thank you. Yeah, that's... So I don't know if you're not too tired to ask any questions. How long time did it take for me? 1 hour?
Yeah.
Yes.
Would it be feasible to grow grain this way, or would that just be too difficult to harvest?
Yeah, the staple foods, it's actually will be a challenge. One day it would be. You know that city, I don't want to say anything bad about city of Edmonton, but you know that more and more land, arable land, is included into the cities around the world. So that the population is increasing, but amount of the area of arable land is shrinking down. Right now, no, it's not feasible. Yeah, because you know that we talked about revenue, right, and business plan, robust business plan, and you cannot compete with, let's say, field producers. It's you know, they're using combines and machines and much more. I would say economical from point of view of, I would say, as your operational cost than in enclosed environment, and especially in the cities. But one day it may happen. Yeah.
Are there any fish restrictions, like types that you can't use?
A type of fish. There. If you Google aquaponics, and probably 90% will be tilapia, and there is a good reason for that. That tilapia is very resilient fish. Carp too. Carp is basically tilapia of their cold climate. But the system can be developed for growing any fish. I can assure you, even seawater fish too. It all depends on the combination of their plants, which will be salt tolerant, right? And their water quality. If you have an efficient filtration systems or solid capture systems, you can grow any fish. You can grow trout, you can grow salmon, anything. It's all matter of your waste management. Yes? Yeah, you wanted to ask a question?
What you talked about was mostly commercial aquaponics. What
Right.
I was interested in, or what I've seen mostly on YouTube, is urban aquaponics, or even in colder climates, basement aquaponics. I was wondering, can absolutely anyone with no background in agriculture start this off? And if so, is there any step-by-step guide you can research to walk you through it?
Well, absolutely, and as a matter of fact, I mentioned that we're developing a system which can be used by urban farmers. And it's right now we stopped it because it was outdoor. The same principles can be used for any scale. It can be, you can build an aquaponic system which can sit on your office desk, basically. What you need to consider again, a few principles which cannot be compromised, and one of those principles is waste management. If you don't have a system which efficiently controls your load of your organic waste, it won't work. On the other side, it's all depends on design and all depends on your balance. Another thing we can consider, and I mentioned it too, basically the system we build in Brooks is very, very affordable, and you can use it as a model for much smaller systems. You remember this? We used this lumber to build a plant bed. That basically the same design can be used for much smaller systems and having basically the same components. You would think, obviously, how you would, if it's worthwhile to invest to buy a drum filter, right? But in our previous generations, we didn't use drum filters. We used sedimentation tanks. So that basically you can play with different components of the system. The most important thing is that you understand the concept, the principle it's based on. If you understand that, if you manage your waste properly, if you deliver oxygen, if you balance your plant and fish components, you know that you are destined to be successful. Yeah.
Is there have you noticed such thing like an oxygen toxicity if you drive the oxygen too high?
Yes, good question. For microbial degradation, no. First of all, their oxygen level cannot go in the water without a limit. It reaches certain point, and it's about 450, 500 hypersaturation, and that's it. For bacteria, no problem. You can load oxygen as much as possible. For fish, yes, and for plants also no problem. For fish, yes, because there is a phenomenon, it's called the bubble disease or microbubble disease. Like I mentioned, the water has only limited capacity to dissolve gases. So when it's very close to limitless capacity and with increase of temperature, of course, the water can hold less and less gas. Their gases, the gas bubbles start forming on every surface in your tank. And you saw it probably when you use tap water and leave it for some time, you could see those bubbles. So those bubbles can really make a big problem for a fish, and it happens during fish transportation. So in our case, we didn't exceed a dissolved oxygen level more than 26, 28 ppm. And there was absolutely no problem with fish. And I talked to many fish growers, and they say, oh, you should probably had some problems with microbubble disease. And I said, no, the fish was feeding fine, no mortalities whatsoever. By the way, our fish mortality was much lower than in commercial RAS, recirculated aquaculture systems.
With tilapia, what temperature were you?
Tilapia is grown commercially at 28, 29 degrees. That's where when you produce the highest yield. In aquaponics, you should remember that your revenue comes not just from fish component, but as a matter of fact, 70-80% of your revenue comes from greenhouse. So if you find a compromise, and in our case it was 24.2 degrees, that the fish will be producing, maybe it will produce a couple of percent less biomass, but still it's really nothing.
And at the lower temperature, then you can boost the oxygen. You don't have to worry about the microbiome.
That's right. But 24, don't go down too much. Like don't go less than 20 to 23%. Then tilapia really starts losing its productivity.
Then you have to, if you were running at a cooler temperature, then you look at carp or something like that, right?
Yeah, carp or trout, salmon. You know that there is a whole bunch of other species. Now, in April this year, the cabinet approved, made a very, very important decision for Alberta aquaculture industry. They approved Australian sea bass, which is a high value fish, probably 3-4 times higher value than tilapia. And we are really looking forward in vitalizing their whole industry after this cabinet's decision, because that may become maybe larger than beef one day.
So it's 8:05 right now. I understand we're a bit over. Maybe we'll just field one more question. I won't go into my presentation in too depth. I might just speak for a couple minutes, but perhaps if there's one more question, and then if there's more questions, perhaps Dr. Savidov will be around for a few minutes after. But just wary of time, so we'll just take one more question for Dr. Savidov.
A simple question.
Yep.
Have you developed a range for the cost of production?
We actually didn't develop the range, but we did economic estimation. Yes, we know what the construction cost for 1 acre aquaponics facility. The only problem is it's first generation. We have to, maybe we can work with you, with the city of Edmonton, and that work on their economically viable model. That taking the degree of technical sophistication and how we can cut down the cost of, I would say, construction and production. Yeah.
So perhaps let's give a big round of applause for Dr. Savidov.